It's a pleasure to introduce our next panel, moderated by Sasha O'Connell, Senior Director of Cybersecurity Programs at Aspen Digital, featuring Stephanie Crowe, Acting Head of the Australian Cybersecurity Centre in the Australian Signals Directorate, Lisa Fong, Deputy Director General of the New Zealand National Cybersecurity Centre, Rajiv Gupta, Head of the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, David Luber, Director of the Cybersecurity Directorate at the National Security Agency, and Felicity Oswald, Chief Executive Officer of the UK National Cyber Security Centre. Please welcome the panel.
Well, good morning, Aspen Cyber. It is wonderful to see everybody here. I want to take just a minute to say a huge welcome to all of you. Obviously, each of you individually joining us to offer your thoughts would be extraordinary, and to have all 5 of you together is a real privilege. So thank you for making the time. I did want to also acknowledge quickly, while this is in some ways unprecedented, it's not entirely unprecedented. About 5 years ago, we had a panel at Aspen with representatives from the intel agencies. And at the time, Felicity, your predecessor, said, it's good there was such a robust introduction because otherwise the group might have been mistaken for a reunion of a boy band. And I'm so pleased, as I know our audience is, that the Five Eyes is no longer the Five Guys. So welcome, and a tip of the hat to you. It's important, it's important. Representation matters. So with that, maybe Felicity, I can turn back to you to kick this off. We've heard a lot already this morning about the threat landscape. And I'll give each of you a chance to weigh in. I'm really curious, how do you see the cyber threat landscape evolving? What is that change piece? And maybe if you can, one thing this audience might not know from your perspective in particular, or a misconception they might have. So Felicity, if you don't mind.
Thank you so much, and it's so great to be here at Aspen. So thank you so much for having us. So the threat landscape in cyber continues to evolve. We all know that. The threat, to some extent, is getting worse day by day and getting more diverse day by day. I think there's a number of things that we'll all agree on, and that's the rise of some of the hostile states, the nation states involved in the cyber landscape, and colleagues have many examples of that that they will speak to. I think there are a couple of other changes as well, though. One is the change in cybercrime and the real proliferation of those tools, and the way you're able to go on a marketplace and buy some of those cybercrime tools. And then the third change I'd highlight would be the cyber proliferation. So the ability of any nation state or any organization or person actually to go and buy a legitimate or semi-legitimate cyber tool from a known and registered company and use that rather than build it themselves. And those 3 changes, hostile states, nation states going after greater disruption, greater espionage through cyber, plus the change in cybercrime, and then this middle ground of this cyber proliferation across so many nations. All 3 of those worry us.
Rajiv, did you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, Felicity said it well. I think that the confluence of those threat actors, as well as the increased digitalization of our society, I mean, everything is connected to the internet now, so the threat surface is incredibly large and growing, right? So we see all these internet-connected devices that are now being used by threat actors in different ways. We see our operational control systems for, factories or other sorts of systems that were never intended to be connected to the internet that now present a great risk to those organizations. So I think that combination with the threats that Felicity mentioned are really presenting the threat surface.
Steph, did you want to add?
Yeah, thank you. As all comments mentioned, I think that the threat in the Australian context continues to evolve just in terms of the way we're seeing advanced persistent threat actors and cyber criminals in terms of the scale against us. In the Australian environment, I think we are seeing more and more impacts to our citizens than we have before. I think that in the financial year in Australia, 2022 to 23, we actually saw over 94,000 reports of cybercrime into the Australian Signals Directorate. And actually that's the equivalent of 1 report every 6 minutes. And when we think back to 3 years ago, that was 1 every 10 minutes, so we're starting to see that gap really start to close. And just to add to Rajiv's point, I think that the way in which technology is proliferating in our environment is also adding to the increased opportunity and vulnerability surface across all of the networks, particularly in critical infrastructure and government, where we start to see some of these attacks and the scale increasing.
That makes sense. Lisa, did you want to add?
A good illustration of the change from the New Zealand context is that earlier this year, New Zealand publicly attributed a state-sponsored actor on our most critical of infrastructures, our democratic institutions. That related to an incident dating back from 2021, so 3 years ago. And actually 2 years after, so a year ago, we had already attributed living off the land activity with our counterparts on stage. So just even illustrated by the what we're attributing and the kinds of activities, you can see a huge progression, a really rapid evolution in not only the threatscape but also the techscape, so the nature of the domain that we're operating in. And in terms of what that means and what you might not see in this audience, there's a rapid diversification of the kinds of relationships, tools, as well as tools of statecraft that we are bringing to the problem set outside of just technical lanes and well into policy and standard lanes.
Thank you. I'll let you have the last word on this stuff.
Thank you. And just to pivot off of what Lisa just mentioned, the living off the land techniques, I think from 2023 and into to date really changes the way I think we have to think about the advanced cyber activity of the PRC, and then what we need to do differently to ensure that we can identify, instrument, and to keep that kind of activity happening in our critical infrastructure networks and other critical national security networks. Of course, the main theme that we have here today is partnerships. And when you think about keeping in front and understanding that threat landscape, that's what we're really good at as partners across the Five Eyes.
Thank you for teeing up my next question. I'm going to come back to that. Of course, seeing all of you together, we know some of what you do together, but maybe, is there someone who wants to offer some examples? Maybe first how you work together, and then I would love to hear too, maybe secondarily we'll go back around academia, private sector, that other kind of outreach. But anyone with an example on the collaboration between and amongst here? Sure, Lisa, yeah.
I can open. So as a small nation, we obviously derive enormous benefit from being able to tap into the depth of expertise and breadth of coverage of our partners. And, you know, traditionally that's been in the sort of indicators and incident space, but equally the ability to stand on a public stage together and talk about secure by design and principles that if we have consistency and the secure by demand, we may well be able to drive changes in behaviour. I'd say, notwithstanding our size, however, our contribution back is unique, and one of the strengths of our partnership is the diversity we each offer. So our ability to take intelligence, run it across our own sovereign accesses, produce a unique feed for New Zealand to consume commercially, and scale our protections across the wider economy is something that is unique to a small nation's reach and our ability to pick up the phone. And our offering back of telemetry and visibility of our operating environment is something that we contribute to the partnership.
Yeah, I would offer each of us are steeped in the world of signals intelligence and cybersecurity. Our teams are built with both sets of expertise. And when you think about the opportunity space of taking what we know and separating it from how we know it, and then driving collective cybersecurity for our nations, that's really the power of the partnership that I see here. And when I think about some of the examples, I'll point to many of the different cybersecurity advisories that are published by all of us in order to drive specific guidance for network defenders and those who are focused on ensuring that the advanced persistent threats are not impacting their systems.
Can I ask you a follow-up on that? We had a little side conversation this morning about coordination of regulation and sort of harmonization. How does that functionally happen? We know there's always room to grow, but as you just said, it's an important contribution of this partnership. What does that look like, Felicity? How do you get that done?
It's such a great question, and I think one of the things that maybe gets forgotten a little bit is how fundamental the Five Eyes is, not just to intelligence, but to cybersecurity and cryptography as well. And the depth of that partnership goes just as far and deep and as long back as any of the intelligence collaboration we've done in the 5 agencies. And that means that not just the leaders on the stage that you see here, not just our operational teams or our comms people who are helping design the advisories as they come out in the final format, but actually Every intelligence officer in any of our teams, the cryptographers, the software engineers, the individuals looking for vulnerabilities, all of those people know their counterparts across the 5 nations. So it's both a formal and an informal relationship. For me, the formal works incredibly well because our policy, our compliance, our legal teams also stay really well connected. Of course, we have slightly different legal frameworks and oversight regimes, but we have shared values, and so many of our systems are built on those shared values and long history. And it's fantastic to see actually individual countries innovating because it means we can learn from what they do and look to work out, can we do something similar, even if it's slightly different in our own context.
Amazing. Somebody, did you want to?
Yeah, I would echo everything you've said, Felicity, in terms of the criticality of the Five Eyes partnership here in the operational space, and how we work together to provide that advice to our policy agencies in the context of taking a whole of government approach to actually how do we defend and mitigate against the cyber threat. And I think you need a balance of both, regulation, policy response, as well as the operational response that we take. And as Dave said, the incredible value of this partnership is definitely being able to draw all of the information we provide together and provide the best defensive advice that we can provide to industry, to our network defenders, and the providers that are responsible for working with us to defend their products. So I think it's incredibly important. In terms of some of the advanced tradecraft we're seeing, the joint advisories, particularly on event logging and best detection in terms of how to prevent and understand what's happening in your environment, is really, really important for us. And with the Five Eyes, there is way more impact and uptake of that advice, and that's a really important thing for us.
Last word on this.
Yeah, no, I mean, 80 years of code making and code breaking dating back to World War II, right? So a long-standing tradition of collaboration that surprised me coming from the private sector and into government. Amazing. I couldn't believe the collaboration that happens. There's only so many experts in this field as well. Being able to reach out to any country and knowing that there's you have that pocket of expertise anywhere is fantastically important. In terms of your point on harmonization, really important, particularly as we get into regulation of critical infrastructure and some of these other spaces, and us all being aligned in terms of what's really important, incredibly valuable for us in terms of North America. We know that many of our industries flow north-south, right? So it's the same set of regulations. If Canada does something different from the US, it doesn't work for industry. So work very closely at the lead end in the advice and guidance, all that technical expertise that we put in place, for example, the cyber performance goals that CISA's put out. We work closely with the US on this as well. We put out our cyber resiliency goals that look exactly the same, right? And that's kind of like the basis for the regulatory guidelines that come later. So just having us aligned from the start. AI is another one with the code badges. Incredibly important to get consistency in the marketplace.
Perfect. And once again, you teed up my next question beautifully. It wasn't pre-planned, but on the private sector outreach piece, maybe I could come back to you on that and ask each of you, how does that integration work? We hear so much about public-private partnerships, and so for each organization doing that individually and then aligning that for multinational companies, can you talk a little bit about what does that look like, and what are some of the challenges and successes there?
Sure, I'll speak a bit to it. And we all have somewhat similar models, but within Canada, it's been really important for us as a single organization that's voluntary, we're not a regulator, is to work with industry aggregators. So, if, for example, the telecom in Canada, we have the CSTAC, or the Cybersecurity Technical Advisory Committee, where we can actually have really detailed, in-depth understanding and threat sharing sessions in terms of, what are we seeing and how can we actually defend the nation. We, of course, share that information across the Five Eyes and make sure that whatever we know is being shared equally across our different groups. We have the same thing for finance as well. The Financial Resiliency Working Group, get all the banks together, insurance companies, stock exchanges, these sorts of things. Energy, the ESTAC, Energy Security Technical Advisory Committee, which is a bit of a gap for us, but looking at our current threats and the threat landscape, what might be targeted, it's really important for us to establish these advisory committees and get not just the collective knowledge of the Five Eyes and the information we can share, but get that really important information from the actual operators back into our spaces as well, so we understand their risk and their threats, and then we can find solutions to that as well.
Absolutely. Lisa, is it the same in New Zealand? The scale, I know, so interested, different. But how does it work in a similar fashion?
Absolutely does. Taking the tertiary sector, for example, we have the similar approach to the security information exchange, so the ability at technical and analytic level to facilitate conversations between universities who are competing in the market. These are research institutes. They are looking for students and want to defend their networks well. It's a great forum to have points of contact in the event that somebody's having a bad day and to build trust trust and higher levels of sharing than we might otherwise see between those universities. We also engage with seniors, so it's really important to us not to just sit in a technical lane, that we also speak to executives and the councils and provide the kinds of prioritisation, understanding of the threatscape as it changes. We provide technical services, so I've talked about malware-free networks, which is our ability to apply indicators across the public and private sector to detect and disrupt threats. We provide those services to one of the major providers of digital and data networks, REANs, to the tertiary sectors, and since their adoption of that service, they've seen about 17,000 events per day across their networks that we've been able to disrupt. So the impact is really real. I'd say at the other end of things, we also like to engage as part of the community as well, so provide our own contribution back. And we have a STEM scholarship for women, particularly Māori and Pacifica women. And so we're looking to also engage in a sort of human and workforce way to make sure that we're growing the capability of the future.
Perfect. Any other thoughts on partnerships?
Yeah, I think I would say from an Australian perspective, I mean, ASD's of the realisation that we cannot and we won't work independently of industry. It's a really important part of how we operate now. And actually some of the best scale that we've achieved, both against adversaries as well as in terms of the defensive environment, have been from those partnerships. Earlier this year, Australia did its first cyber sanctions. And we couldn't have achieved that without the partnerships of the Five Eyes here, but also the incredible amount of insight, support and assistance of some of the critical industry partners involved in sharing us some of that threat data. So I would just highlight that from a scaled perspective on how we counter the threat environment, it's a really part of the way we operate now. And our National Partnerships Program in ASD is framed around that very principle.
Did you want to?
Yeah, I'd just like to emphasize the scale piece. One of the ways we can scale cybersecurity is bringing the insights that government can see, particularly intelligence agencies, to what industry can also see. And the power is really analyst-to-analyst collaboration. And as our analysts can work with analysts in industry, that's where you get to see the opportunity to share insights back and forth, bring context to the most important threats, and then develop countermeasures and mitigations to ensure that we don't just support incident response, but how do you also outmaneuver adversary activity prior to exploitation occurring. So I think the real power in the public-private partnerships is that ability to scale and to link the analysts together in a way that they can truly have amazing outcomes.
Perfect. And Felicity, are there challenges that remain in this space? Is this all good news from your perspective at the core, or anyone else? But start to have a chance to
I think
respond.
the challenges for us, firstly as a Five Eyes, I think for me the single biggest challenge is the really pragmatic one. We all live and work in different time zones. Yes. And so that means anyone in the Americas gets it easy when there's a video call because they can do it in the working day. Some of us have to get up really early or go to bed really late on those days. But there are practical things. Technology makes that better. And getting the chance to spend time together as we are this week face-to-face is fantastic, and we get to do that multiple times a year, which is really, really important. But I think broadly in the partnership space, it has to start with trust, and it has to start with understanding, but it also has to start with listening, because each of our contexts, whether that's across governments on this stage or beyond, or into industry, are going to be slightly different. But actually, we all have such shared values and a shared vision of a safer world with an internet, ultimately, and technology that is safe to allow us to go about our daily lives, but also be prosperous as nations and really get after that innovation that we all know is going to enhance, ultimately, humankind without being so grandiose. But we have to do that in a safe and secure way. And actually, if you have that shared starting point, getting to a space where you're collaborating doesn't feel so hard, if you can agree on those great big moments. So for me, yeah, of course there are challenges, and we all have that in our daily lives, but it's that sense of moving together and looking at how others are innovating. And I think there's a concept for me about moving at the pace of the fastest, not the slowest. Mm-hmm. And that means a bit of to risk overusing the team sport analogy. You know, there's a sense of making sure that you have the strongest athlete in each race and the rest of us support them, and then learn from them and work out what we can do to add value from our context or viewpoint. And that applies equally in the private sector too.
Perfect. Last piece on partnerships. I know we have a lot of faculty and students here. Anything on academia? Did you want to?
Oh, academia is critically important to the success for NSA, and I know our partners as well. I'll first start with our K through 12 program, Gen Cyber. This really starts early in the careers of young individuals who are interested in getting into cybersecurity. So we sponsor camps across the nation in the summertime for students to first get into the idea of cybersecurity, programming, and other STEM-related disciplines. But it goes beyond that because our work with Centers for Academic Excellence, we have over 400 universities across the nation where we have CAE programs for cybersecurity, cybersecurity research, and computer network operations. This helps all of government ensure that the next generation of cyber experts are being trained to the level necessary to ensure that they can work the advanced persistent threats and the computer network operations needs for our nation. Summer internships are also available for those students.
Students out there.
And the students should have signed up already for their summer internships. But about 300 summer interns will come into NSA every year, 12 weeks, cleared, working real problems, contributing to both the cybersecurity and SIGINT mission, and their contributions will become part of the work that we do after they leave. About 85% of those students join us full-time when they graduate.
That's amazing.
So it's a really great program. And then lastly, I have to give a plug to the National Science Foundation for the Scholarships for Service program, where students are provided scholarships for 2 years of service in government once they graduate. A really great program.
Awesome, thank you. Anyone else? Quick plugs on academia or, yeah?
I mean, I definitely would, and it's such fantastic work that NSA and other counterparts do, thinking right through across the skills and the research landscape in the UK. Our university sector is so vital. So we at the top end do sponsor research programs, we accredit courses, we work with academic centres of excellence. And then, like Dave said, we also have a responsibility as signals intelligence and security agencies to think about the skills of the future. And that does start when you're in elementary school or high school within the US context, or primary or secondary school in a UK context. And we have to be all able to think about what's the language we're using as a community to ensure that we're getting the most diverse reach into those schemes, as well as getting the numbers. We all have a shortage of cyber skills. So some of the programs we run are particularly aimed at minority groups, at young women, to join those programs as well. And I think we all have such a shared aim in ensuring the whole of the cybersecurity community, whether someone has a government email address at the end of their career or not, is actually a shared challenge. And it's another area that we partner really closely with both universities and schools, but also industry in the UK is a big sponsor of our skills program called Cyber First. But no, fantastic.
Thank you, thank you. Anybody else? Good? Well, with 15 minutes left, I want to turn to the future. So we've talked about kind of where we are and what we're doing about it, but I know this audience wants to hear from you all of what you see coming, and in particular, how emerging technology, of course we can talk about AI and post-quantum encryption and all the kinds of things. There's plenty to talk about. It'll take us more than 15 minutes, but I wanted to give each of you a chance to really have a minute and talk to this group about what you see ahead. And maybe, Rajiv, we could start with you.
Sure. I mean, I'll start with the obvious. I mean, you mentioned post-quantum encryption, and the algorithms are out, and the big challenge there is to be able to roll those out into industry through standardization programs and basically making sure that's embedded in your procurement guidance and churning the equipment based on a risk-based kind of understanding as to where that risk really manifests itself in terms of getting the standardized cryptographic algorithms into your technical appliances that are out there. AI is a really big one, right? And that's going to be something that enables organizations like ours. Of course, we're looking to exploit that in any way we can to really get the benefit, but really important to be able to secure that because of the presence it will actually have. Threat actors will be using AI for things like content generation. We see that in terms of threat actors trying to divide and disrupt us, right, with misinformation and these sorts of things. So content generation and the ease of actually being able to do that with some of these tools, certainly something that we have to keep our eyes on and make sure that we're managing that as best we can. And threat actors will use that for things like social engineering and other sorts of elements that way as well. Same point in time, there's very good things that can happen in that space as well. We talk a lot about secure by design. We're all trying to put forth standardized ways of upping the ecosystem in general. But those same AI tools can be used to develop better products and find vulnerabilities before they're actually shipped to market, so they're not patching every weekend, right? So lots of opportunities, but lots of threats as well, and it's our job to stay abreast of them and share our knowledge and make sure that we're putting out the right advice and guidance to help protect it.
Thank you, Lisa.
Beautifully said, Rajiv. I guess I'll take a little bit a higher level rather than technical. We see the threat everywhere that we make it easy for them, and so I suppose we're looking for a future where good cybersecurity is practiced everywhere by everyone all the time. And that's really about engaging everyone's roles and responsibilities and recognising that we will not get on top of our technical opportunities without recognising where the threat's evolving and doing our part. So we have recently integrated our search with our NCSC functions, and we look a little bit more like our counterpart agencies now. And in doing so, we've really tried to think about where's our value add here? How do we make sure that we position ourselves to do only what we can do and enable others? So we're really guided by 3 key principles looking to the future. The first is that people act on informed decisions, so that individuals are engaged with what they can do to help protect themselves. We want to see that the basics are basic, that organisations are able to implement the required security controls that they need that are suitable to their organisation, but also that the digital supply chain has pre-implemented secure by design principles. And that leaves us a space where we can really focus on the hardest end of the problem and engage our partnership on that. So we hope that that provides a sort of more dynamic mindset, I suppose, and range of tools and a sense of empowerment to people that we've got this.
Stephanie?
Everything said by my colleagues. I guess I might just add, I think that, we've talked about the threat today and the scale of that increasing and becoming more challenging. And I think then it requires looking into the future a scaled response, to counter that and deal with some of the challenges coming our way. Technology is one, but I actually think that, there needs to be a really collective response at senior leadership levels across industry, private sector, government, to actually do this and think about a risk management of cybersecurity as you would any other enterprise risk, and that's going to be really critically important into the future. ASD, we're taking the approach that we are going to engage executive leaders and start to drive some of that culture from the top of organisations to help with that. We've briefed, a large portion, 40% of our ASX 200 NASDAQ equivalent in the United States. That's a really important part of our mission because driving change often helps when you're driving it from the top. And actually thinking about and having senior leaders think about what are the most significant assets in my network and environment? How do I risk manage and protect those critical assets when the problem set is so large? And I think that's going to be a really important part of where we head into the future in risk managing some of the threats out there.
And can I ask just a follow-up on that? And how in terms of that outreach and awareness and sort of driving, is that programmatic for you? How is that organized? Is it across agencies or how are you working through those issues?
So we prioritise that based on, core parts of the industry that support the running of our economy. Mm-hmm. We look at tiering our national partnership program in terms of tiers and sectors to make sure that we're reaching the right audiences and scaling in that way. So in ASD we have over 3,000 partners that are what we call network partners, and those are large organisations that have huge environments and require a lot of advice from us around network security and response. We have medium, large organisations. We have over 5,000 partners there. And then we also scale our advice to over 100,000 home users that have joined our program. And it's really about making sure that that tailored advice from a defence perspective is provided uniquely to those sectors and to those organisations.
Amazing, thank you. Felicity?
In terms of the future, so the future for me, I guess I think about it in 3 ways. Firstly, the threat, and we know that that's uncertain at the moment. Unfortunately, there's nothing to suggest it's going to get more predictable over the next few years, and there are some indications that things may get tough at times. So we can't expect the threat picture to lessen necessarily. That means that as we evolve the future technologies, and Rajiv has mentioned AI and the future of quantum computing, particularly in relation to cryptography. Those are absolutely 2 of the technologies we're focused on. We need to make sure that those future technologies are as secure as possible against that threat landscape. And then the third element for me about the future is how we respond. And for us in the NCSC, and I know it's a shared ambition across all of our nations, is to ensure that we have the levers and the incentives aligned so that it's easy to make really good cybersecurity decisions at every level. Whether you're a citizen thinking about your password, how do you make a smart decision on what a great password for your new device is? How do we ensure that a new Internet of Things device that you buy for your home is as safe as possible? There's a role for government and the regulators there. The UK this year set out some really groundbreaking regulation to ensure that all new IoT devices coming to market are much more secure. But that scales right up. Stephanie mentioned the importance of scale. We have to think about all of those levers, all of those incentives we all have, buying smartly, using our consumer power. We're big supporters of CISA's secure by design work. So secure by default is so important for the future. And for us, it's thinking about how do each part of the system, whether private industry, whether individual consumers, whether governments, do their part in that maze to ensure that it's easy at every level to make those really safe and secure decisions for the future. And the kind of big elephant in the room is the tech debt. And that's the one that we need to help organizations who are grappling with technical debt and worrying about the future and how they modernize to really bring forward good examples, and that we as government are there to support them in whatever means we can going forward.
Thank you. Last word on the future, no pressure.
No pressure, no, not at all. Well, just to add to the great discussion that's occurred already, I think we all know there's no single silver bullet to cybersecurity. And when I think about the future, taking from all the discussions so far, the threat requires us to think differently about how we protect our networks. So think about today where we have a single edge device that we're counting on to ensure that someone doesn't get in and get access to the crown jewels of our critical networks, whether it's in critical infrastructure or government. We need to think more about zero trust concepts. We need to make sure that as we think about the future of networks, we have to assume that breach will occur. How do we make sure that if breach occurs and when breach occurs, that there's limited movement for those adversaries to get to the data that they're really trying to get after? Second, I think cryptography plays a critical role in making sure that advanced nation states can't do the reconnaissance they need to do in order to get to the networks that they'd like to get to for exploitation. To prepare for the quantum era of computing, we all have to have a quantum roadmap. Whether that quantum roadmap is for national security systems or whether that quantum roadmap is for critical infrastructure, academia, we're at a pivotal moment. Because particularly for industry, the algorithms have now been announced, implementation will start occurring in products, and as folks are looking at their tech debt, they should be really matching that tech debt up to their quantum roadmap to ensure that they're buying new products that will be supported with the new advanced quantum resistant algorithms that will help you protect with high assurance with cryptography that will counter a quantum computer in the future. So really tying these things together, tech debt, quantum, and making sure that we're preparing for our future, not just replacing devices because it's time to replace them. Let's make sure that we replace them with a strategy that's going to make it more difficult for an adversary in the future. And then lastly, AI. I mean, you can't have a conference without talking about AI. We think about this from a couple of different facets from the National Security Agency. First, from our foreign intelligence perspective, we have to be able to detect and counter adversaries as they try and manipulate or use AI against national security and other critical systems. Second, just as we've done with other parts of industry, we need to develop those deep partnerships with AI companies, as well as partnerships with those who are implementing AI within our national security systems and other government systems to make sure that they're doing it securely and making sure that we can share insights that we have on how adversaries are threatening those new ecosystems. And then lastly, I think, and really important, is promoting, evaluating, and developing best practices and guidance on how to secure the AI ecosystem. So back in April, mid-April, 15th of April of this year, we published our first guidance on securing AI ecosystems, but there will be more of that coming in the next even couple weeks.
Perfect. Thank you. We have about 3 minutes left. I just want to do one quick speed round for each of you. You all have offered thoughts I know are so relevant to folks here, leaders in the private sector, in government, in academia. Again, we have a lot of students here, so I want to just go back through and maybe start with you if you don't mind. Can you just offer a bit of advice? We have students here interested in careers in cybersecurity. You offered some very specific internship and other opportunities at the NSA. Any other life advice, things you all wish you had known then? Again, with 3 minutes, we'll just go back through real quickly. Dave, start with you.
Well, first off, for the students in the audience, the summer internships are really awesome. We also have co-op opportunities for those students. But when we have engagements with academia, I think it's really important to have engagements with the professors and the students, because your professors are guiding you through your programs, and when they understand the value of what you're contributing and where your goals and aspirations are, it's really going to help out when you're then deciding at the end whether you enter into government or enter into industry, that they've got you on the right track, because they're really close to the work that you're doing every day.
Thank you. Thank you for your passion for our students as well, Felicity.
Thank you so much. So for me, I think one of the things that cybersecurity suffers from is a bit of a reputation that suggests you have to be a deep computer scientist at the age of 18 or 21 to be able to have a career in this sector. I am proof that that is not the case. I learned to code when I was in my 30s. And by the way, I don't have to code every day now. And that's a good thing for the nation and for the world. But for me, there's something about the cybersecurity community does genuinely welcome all skills. We talk a lot in GCHQ about the importance of a mix of minds. And that's about the representation, the communities you come from, your gender, your background from an academic perspective, or your interests, as well as the things you can do in the workplace. So don't be put off, and be curious, and seek out new opportunities. Ask questions. That's such an important thing in all of our jobs, is to ask great questions and really listen to the answers. But it's fantastic everyone's here, and I really am excited about the next generation coming through.
Thank you.
I am also living proof that you don't have to be a deep coder or technical expert to have a career in this field. And I think that just to really add to your brilliant points, because I'm in complete agreement with Felicity, it's about also not being afraid of the tech. In my experience, technical people, if they get asked questions, get very excited, and they're more than happy to explain to you every intricate part of their job and mission. So I think that I would tell students out there that, absolutely, the curiosity thing is key, and asking questions, don't be afraid to do that, because there's not a day in cybersecurity that I don't go home learning something new as well. So it's a constantly evolving space, and we need people to be asking questions and joining us on this journey.
Perfect, thank you. With our 37 seconds left, I want to hear from both of you.
Very
please.
briefly, Felicity's mentioned the sort of multidisciplinary nature of the industry. I'd also add that cyber years are like dog years. So you've got to move fast, and the range of disciplines you need to keep bringing together to get the right sort of triangulation on your landscape. You need to keep working that. So that might feel a little unsettling, but you will get more out of your existing staff, and you will be quicker to respond if you're able to keep switching it up.
Final word, sir. 3 seconds.
I would just say that we also have a co-op program. So I would just say, but absolutely, curiosity, absolutely essential. The career is always changing. You never know what you're going to be doing, and what you think you're starting as a student will be something very different 10 years later or 15 years later. But an amazing career, I would say.
Amazing. Thank you all again on behalf. Please join me in thanking this amazing panel, and we will be on our way.